Namo Buddhaya, Namo Amitabha. Hello everyone. So today I feel like talking about emptiness, the transcendent, the great wisdom of Sunyata. So emptiness is an extremely important teaching in both Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. The concept of emptiness is even broader in Mahayana Buddhism, which we'll see why later. So what exactly is emptiness? So first of all, emptiness is not nothingness. Sometimes people may misunderstand, it's emptiness, nothing exists. It's not like that. In the Heart Sutra, the Buddha clearly tells us that form is emptiness, emptiness is form. So it's the same for feelings, perceptions, mental activities, and consciousness. So all this, physical and mental, everything is in fact emptiness. Why is it emptiness? So emptiness means that there is no permanent fixed self-nature that is attached to anything. It is empty of a self or anything that pertaining to a self. So when we say the self, we can refer to something that is fixed, it's permanent, it's independent, it's individual. But when we say the things are empty of inherent existence or intrinsic existence, it means that it's empty of a self. It's empty of just permanent, individual, independent existence. And we'll see why. So why form is emptiness? Form means all this phenomena, everything we can see. For instance, our body. This body is actually constantly changing. Sometimes people may be attached to, I am this body. In fact, not really, because this body is actually constantly changing. It is that every day we had billions of cells that are being replaced or die off. So the body is in a constant state of flux. And so are everything that we can see in this material reality. The table behind me, in this moment it's a table, but if you use actually microscope to look at it, it is not fixed. There are lots of particles that made up this table, and they're actually constantly moving, interacting with each other. And if I smash the table, then it just becomes a trunk of woods. And then later, these woods may be burned by the fires, and it became ashes. So everything that we can see or experience in this material reality are actually constantly changing. They are impermanent. That's why they're empty of a self. There is no this permanent fixed self-nature that's attaching to them. And this is the same not just for the physical reality, but also our mental reality. For instance, our thoughts, our feelings, which are also always changing all the time. Today you like someone, tomorrow you don't like someone. So do not be surprised if friendship or relationship fall out. This is just normal. Everything is constantly changing, including our thoughts, our feelings, our perceptions, and also mental activities. What are these mental activities? So we don't just have one thought, but really thought after thought continuously, without stopping. So all this is also constantly changing, or sometimes this is also called the mental formations. And also consciousness, even our consciousness, the ability that can discern, distinguish, or to be attached, to separate. That's the basis of all our experience with the world, physical and mental. This is also constantly changing. So in Buddhism, we talk about the alaya consciousness, the storehouse consciousness that stores all the impressions from all our past and present. Even this is constantly changing. In a way, it is still an illusion, this illusional mind. Why is an illusion? Because it's not permanent, it's not unchanging. Instead, it's constantly changing. It is impermanent. So in Buddhism, what we call real must be something that is always the same. It's permanent, it's unchanging. Then you can call it real. But what is an illusion? It's things that are actually constantly changing, and it is impermanent. So the reality that we currently experience, both physical and mental, are actually in essence an illusion. They're constantly changing. They're not fixed. They are in a state of flux. That's why they're empty of a self. They're empty of this permanent fixed self nature. And people may be like, but Buddha nature is unchanged. Buddha nature is permanent. So Buddha nature is also emptiness. Emptiness is Buddha nature. When one realizes the emptiness in all things and all phenomena, then one realizes the Buddha nature. So the nature of the reality is actually emptiness. The true nature of the mind is in fact emptiness. The true nature of all things and phenomena is also emptiness. Emptiness is the truth of life and the universe. Modern science has proved that what the Buddha said 2,600 years ago was in fact true, particularly in the field of quantum physics. So I'll put the links of 2 videos about Buddhism and science, particularly about quantum physics, in the description box, and I highly recommend everybody go and watch those videos to have a better understanding of the topic. So before, people think that materials are fixed. Materials are made up by atoms, and they thought atoms were fixed. Until later, they developed more technology. In fact, atoms can also be further divided. It's made up by electrons and quarks. And in fact, quarks can also be further divided into neutrons and protons. In fact, all this can even be further divided, and in the end, it left with largely emptiness. In quantum physics, this is also called the quantum field. So the quantum field is a similar idea that what the Buddha called emptiness. Everything we experience in this world, physical and mental, the true nature of it is actually emptiness. It is empty of a self or anything that pertaining to a self. It's empty of this independent individual existence. Things do not exist independently. In Buddhism, not just in Buddhism, but really in reality, we say things arise due to causes and conditions. When causes and conditions change, then the things also change. So what's the creation theory in Buddhism? In Buddhism, we don't say there is an absolute creator that creates and controls everything. But instead, things arise due to dependent origination, due to causes and conditions. And when causes and conditions change, things also change. So everything is also constantly changing. Whatever that we see in this material reality, from our body, from all these material objects, the trees, the mountains, the lakes, including the planets, all things are actually constantly changing, with the nature being emptiness. So what creates everything? Everything arises from emptiness. With different causes and conditions, it gives rise to different phenomena. But the true nature of the reality is emptiness. And in emptiness is neither created nor destroyed. This is a bit like the physics law of conservation of energy, how energy cannot really be created nor destroyed. It simply changes form from one to another. So it is a bit like that. The true nature of who we are, the true nature of our mind, the Buddha nature And emptiness is neither created nor destroyed, and no birth and no death, no beginning, no end. In Buddhism, the Buddha used many words to describe the same thing, such as emptiness, Buddha nature, Tathagata, Tathagatagarbha, Dhammakaya, Dhammadhatu. Like all this are in fact, they're talking about the same thing, but just from different perspectives, different aspects of the same thing. Why the Buddha used so many words? Did he try to confuse us? No, he used all these different words also to appeal to people with different levels of understanding capacities, and most importantly, he doesn't want us to be attached to any concept, because the truth is in fact indescribable. The human language is very limited to actually describe the state of the perfect enlightenment. That's why all these words are used simply as skillful means, as ways of convenience to help us, to point us to see the full moon. It's like the finger. Buddha used the finger to point us to see the full moon. We must try to see the full moon, but not to be attached to the fingers. So all the words are like the fingers. So do not just be attached to the finger, but really try to see the full moon. If there is anything that can be called God, it would be this. It would be emptiness. You can call emptiness God or Allah or Atman if you wish. In the Mahayana Sutras, such as the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, the Buddha also called the Buddha nature, the self nature, a capital S. And also in the Platform Sutra, we also see the sixth patriarch Huineng used the word self nature to describe the Buddha nature. So this is not contradictory to non-self. When we talk about non-self, this self, we mean there is no individual, independent self-nature. It doesn't exist. But if we were to talk about this self-nature, capital S, we mean the Buddha nature, like in Mahayana Sutras. So you can talk about the true self-nature, which also means the oneness in all things and all beings, the nature of emptiness, the Buddha nature. So you can use these words provided that you understand the meaning behind it. So it is not contradictory. If you don't understand the meaning behind it, then you think it's contradictory, but in fact it is not. And that's why when we read the Buddha Sutras, we must not just be attached to words. All words, all talks, all languages that are used are simply ways of convenience for the Buddha to point us to see this truth. What is the truth is actually indescribable, because whatever we say, it's easy for us to fall into the trap of definitions, concepts, attachment, and separation. Now I'm talking about emptiness, and some people may be just attached to emptiness. Everything is emptiness. Now, if you were to attach to the word of emptiness, then I'm going to tell you, Buddha nature is not emptiness, nor is it emptiness. I'm not trying to confuse you, but really trying to break all the attachment you have to words, to concepts. Buddhism is not about words, concepts, or theory. One needs to experience to really understand. In emptiness, there is no attachment, no separation, including no attachment to the so-called concept of emptiness. Same as Buddha nature. If you have realized Buddha nature, if you have realized perfect enlightenment, you will also not be attached to such concept. In the end, there is nothing to be attained, nothing to be attached, and one attains Anuttaya Sanya Sambodhi, the perfect enlightenment. This is, of course, not easy to do, the most difficult thing to do. Why is that? Because we are often attached to things or to people or to relationships. We try to grasp things that are just impermanent in nature, and we try to grasp hold of things that we think will not change, but in fact they are constantly changing. If we understand that the true nature is actually emptiness, then we should not be attached to anything we see and experience in this world. Instead, we shall perceive things as they are, without attachment, without separation. But this is really indeed the most difficult thing to do. Why is that? Because our attachment is strong. Our attachment to illusions are strong. Our separation is deep. Even for someone who talks about emptiness, or who thinks one may understand emptiness from an intellectual, mental perspective, it is still very different from one actually can realize emptiness. I can spend the whole day to talk about emptiness, but it doesn't mean that I've realized emptiness. I'm very, very far from it. Why we have such a strong attachment, for instance, for our physical body. Even if I talk about emptiness, this body is not mine, it's just mine to keep temporarily. Even if we understand this theoretically, but if someone wants to take our lives away, they want to cut the meat off on my body, I may be scared because I still have the attachment to the body. As ordinary unenlightened beings, our attachment is very strong, very deep. And that's why we actually need the Pure Land method, the Pure Land Dharma gate. This is the most suitable Dharma gate for most people in this world to attain enlightenment in Amitabha Buddha's Pure Land. In this world, due to our strong attachment to illusions and separation, it is almost impossible for anyone to realize enlightenment by their own self-effort. That's why Shakyamuni Buddha told us about Amitabha Buddha, the Pure Land Dharma gate. The easy way out of samsara is first to migrate to Amitabha Buddha's Pure Land, and there we will realize the perfect enlightenment, the true nature of the mind, the true nature of who we are, the nature of emptiness. So I hope it helps. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Amitabhaya.